Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for being here this afternoon. I have an all-star panel, as you can see, 4 in front of me, here right alongside me, and 2 on the screen. Hello to Screenland, and I'm going to introduce them one by one and then get straight into it. And I can't wait to hear the exchange, because clearly His Excellency, the Minister of Investment, just talked about the kingdom and all of its drivers. And I'm going to actually, if you don't mind, Excellency, I'm going to come to you last now, because Remy stole one of my questions. So I want to come back to you last, because I think it's important that you hear from leaders who are investing in the kingdom or have invested in the kingdom. So let me introduce the panel firstly. You obviously have met His Excellency Minister Khalid Al-Falih, the Minister of Investment, and a long-time friend of mine in the kingdom. We have Mark Bristow, who you've heard from several times today, President and Chief Executive Officer of Barrick Gold Corporation. We have Abdullah Busfar, which I know you told me to tell your name right. I hope I didn't butcher it. Chairman of EV Minerals, which is a very, very important company in the kingdom, and one that's going to be a very, very big EV metals, be big part of the value chain, especially in something I'm caring a lot about lately, which is EVs, as my Lucid Motors role. And of course, at the very end on the stage, Michael Barton, who's Portfolio Manager of Orion Resource Partners. On our screen, we have someone you've heard from this afternoon, Harvey, Chief Executive Officer and President of Alcoa. And of course, we have Jock O'Rourke, Chief Executive Officer of the Mosaic company. To the gentleman starting with Mark, I'll just go in order. I have been coming to the kingdom for myself 25 years, and I'd love to hear your perspective of why invest in the kingdom now, looking forward. And several of you have got investments here already, some of you are prospective. I'd just like to get all of you to respond to that question, then come back to you, Excellency, and get the call to action based on what we mutually hear. So, Mark.
Good afternoon. Barrick's been invested in Saudi Arabia for a while, but I think it's been, for me, a particularly constructive engagement over the last 3 years to participate in the changes that have happened that we've heard about today. And at the end of the day, you know, I've built my business through partnerships, and as you've seen today, Saudi has become a real leader in challenging the world on how to do business. And I think we've seen a number of conversations today that perhaps should have been made more vocal during COP26 and leading up to that. And I think we've seen a real constructive conversation. And therein lies that point about partnerships, because if you want to be a world-class business doing mining that's going to be acceptable to future generations, that partnership has to include host countries, host country leadership. And for me, that's the opportunity, apart from the God-given endowment of the Arabian Shield. And then we have the Tethyan metal belt, which is largely an undeveloped endowment that, according to our geologists, has a bigger potential than the Andean trend or the whole Western America seaboard. So we see that we've I think, demonstrated the importance of partnerships, both from the kingdom and also Barton, who is our partner in our investments. And I think, I know that our commitment is to build on that, to continue to develop the prospectivity and the mining opportunities in the Arabian Shields. But there's another component to that, and that is, you know, the Tethyan metals belt runs through many challenging geopolitical addresses. And as has been said again many times today, Saudi is a gateway into that brings opportunity together. And I think this world has over the last 5 years denigrated into deglobalization. And the conversation today is how do we open the door and build together a more global perspective when it comes to mining. Then we will address the E, the S, and all the other benefits that we need to invest in to ensure that future generations can enjoy this planet as much as we have.
Thank you, Mark. Mr. Buswar, how do you see and I'd love you to actually comment on the partnership point as well, investing in KSA and why now?
Okay, let me just go back to, it's been always, investors say, why should I come and invest in Saudi? And I would say there is no better person to answer this than His Excellency and Ministry of Investment and the team around, and they've been doing a wonderful job clarifying to investors what are the incentives and the enablers that we've been hearing, large number of them, and most of them have been executed or done to do that. But I'll talk about it from an outside of the regulatory body or government body. Saudi Arabia have been enjoying a very stable investment climate. You look at the Aramco days and SABIC days, people who are invested for the last 30, 40 years, still most of them are enjoying a good return on their investment and very stable investment. If you look at what have been done lately, why someone could come and invest? If I have the money, where should I put it? And I asked my colleagues, the Australian investors who joined lately, and we keep adding investors to EV Metal, and I'll come back to that. And I said, what do you need in a country to invest? And the first thing, they say stability. We need to make sure that our investment is stable. We could finance it, so banks would allow us, allow us to have access to project finance. And we need to be able to freely transfer our profits, or we exit without. And I think they find this very clearly, well-defined, very satisfactory. Investor doesn't want to go to an unstable place or an area where there is hardly no infrastructure whatsoever, or hardly you can finance your. So none of this exists in Saudi Arabia. When it comes to the topic of our discussion, our panel, the full value chain, when I started with the Australian, and they said, you're changing the business model. Initially, we went as a Saudi investors, invested in a company that has a nickel mine. That was about 2 years ago. And that was it. We were going to do the concentration, sell the spodumene abroad to somewhere else, Europe, China, somewhere else. And very quickly, we changed that, and we said, look, we have learned in Saudi, and during my days in Ma'aden, we have learned culturally that doing big projects, look at the full value chain. Look at the value. And we've done successfully 2 world scale, the largest in its industry, the phosphate and the aluminum complex. And was done professionally, successfully, and schedule. And I think it is a rewarding investment to the local and the foreign investors. Now, to come back to why now, and I think what triggered my attention personally 3 years ago is the determination of the country, and not only that, putting into action and acting to everything they have said, the transformation to a renewable in a big way. And that trigger what does that take? And I started learning. During our old days when I was a miner, nickel and lithium were not in our radar. And that's when I started saying, well, we need a nickel, we need a lithium. We went to Australia. Now, the model we have adopted today is we acquire as many opportunities as we can in these critical minerals, which we identified. And actually, tomorrow will be in Australia an announcement that we have launched Australian Lithium Initiative, which really will gather a large producers or mine under development under the umbrella of EV Metal, development and investment, to secure our supply chain to our world's largest chemical complex of minerals in Yanbu. We had the nickel, we didn't have the lithium, so now it evolved that we have the nickel and cobalt, we'll have the lithium now, and eventually we are set and ready with the know-how, with the expertise, and with the funding to explore Saudi Arabia for its critical minerals. And hopefully we'll be seeing more of that in the years to come.
Thank you. Michael, investor, you're an investor, so why would you encourage investment to come here?
Yeah, thanks, Andrew. So we're a little bit different than I think everybody else on the panel in that Orion, firstly, is an investor rather than a mining company. And I think, secondly, we're probably, I think I'm right in saying we're unique in that we don't currently have investments in Saudi Arabia. But we would still like to have investments. So I'll perhaps just comment on two things. Why we would like to be an investor, you know, the opportunities here, if you will, but then also the reason we're perhaps not today. I think in terms of the first reasons, I think most of the panel's already touched upon it. The Arabian-Nubian Shield is probably one of the most prospective and, you know, relative to its potential, underdeveloped regions in the world. I think we would agree with Mark, including the Tethyan Belt even more so. Secondly, political stability that's been touched upon by most of the panelists. Thirdly, relatively speaking, don't want to downplay it for a second, but the inherent risks around environmental and social issues are perhaps less in Saudi Arabia. Population density, proximity to those population centers, less environmentally sensitive areas, and that's a mass generalization, but as a whole, a good position relative to some places. And thirdly, just inherently a country that is comfortable with natural resource development. So, you know, that level of comfort. The reason we're not an investor today is fairly simple. There is a lack of opportunity for an investor like Orion. Now, Orion, again, we're not a major like a Barrick or an Alcoa. We are typically funding companies in what's termed the junior sector of the mining industry. So we're providing packages of financing to companies to take them into production. These are smaller mines, but, you know, this is in many ways, that junior sector is in the most vibrant mining economies, that junior sector is often the lifeblood of, you know, of that country's mining sector. And really, there isn't a junior mining sector as of today in Saudi Arabia. So, you know, the question then becomes, what's missing today? And I think the junior mining sector and us as an investor in that sector, I think what do we need? We need clarity around ownership. That's not to say the ownership needs to be anything in particular. It could be a 1% or another percent. It doesn't really matter. But clarity over that ownership and security over that ownership. I think, secondly, we would need a very clear legislative framework to take a project from exploration through to production. And then thirdly, we would want to know that there was going to be a market for that project later down the line for other people coming in. So, you know, if we were developing a junior gold company, we would want to know that a Barrick is there to buy that company or buy that asset. And I think a vibrant mining sector, a vibrant junior mining sector shouldn't be forgotten in its import to the overall health of what should be, you know, a huge industry here in Saudi Arabia.
Thank you, Michael. To the screen, I'll start with you, Jock, saying we've heard from Roy already. You're an investor here. Why are you comfortable and why would you continue to invest in this new drive in Saudi Arabia? You're on mute, I believe.
Okay.
Still?
It's the, there we go. Am I on now?
You're on.
Okay, well, let me start 10, 12 years ago when we first got involved. I mean, at that stage, obviously it starts with resources. It starts with mineral resources, but also human resources. Saudi had with Modern and our partnership with Modern, you know, a great mining company, as I think His Excellency said in the last session, a leader in its field. Our partnership with Modern was a strong partnership. They bring to the table great experience through, you know, first Saudi Aramco and then SABIC and now Modern, great engineers, great people, great project management skills. So that's the first piece. The second piece is infrastructure and readiness. And at the time, it was coming, and now I think it's really accelerated. I think of the city, the Ras Al Khaimah Industrial City, which at the time of our investment was Alcoa and ourselves were both invested with Modern. Now I look at Wad Al Shamal City, which has been developed, the Saudi railway from the north through to Ras Al Khaimah. All of those things, the infrastructure makes access to these minerals so much better. And then the third is really important, is reform. And the kingdom has done a lot of great reform in the last, particularly the last while. And I think it follows from the 2030 vision to maximize this sector. And so all of those things have made it great from an investment perspective. And I think as I look forward, it should only get better.
Great. Thank you, Jock. Roy, Alcoa and its experience. I think you're on mute as well.
Okay. How about this? Can you hear me now?
A little low on volume, but yes, we can hear you.
Okay, good. I'll try and speak up to make sure you can hear me. The disadvantage of going last is that a lot of my points have been taken, so I just want to highlight a few things that have been said and add a couple quick layers. Starting with partnership, it all starts with finding the right partners in country, with making sure that you're able to find the right people to connect with, to understand some of the differences, the cultural differences, the bureaucracy differences that might be happening in Kingdom, and be able to establish those and work through issues as they come. And the fact is, because we have a joint venture, we've had it now for more than a decade, there can be bumps along the road, and being able to sort through those in order to drive improvements, that partnership and that ability to discuss issues is absolutely critical. And we've found Ma'aden as a great party, one that we can discuss things with and one that we can build together. Just on the stretching along, and very similar to what Jacques was saying, but when you start at the resource, you've got the resource in place from a bauxite perspective, you've got the infrastructure built between bauxite and Ras Al Khaimah, where we have the refinery and smelter. For us, that stability, that competitiveness of the energy price, because it's not just a mining business, but also a transformation business where you're using energy in the refining process, but then also energy in the smelting process. The fact that we had great availability at a very competitive price, and looking towards the future, driving that competitive price, making sure we have stability in price of energy long into the future. And sort of connecting back where Mark started this whole discussion is around ESG, right? The fact is that the kingdom is really driving forward. And if anything, you have to highlight the boldness of vision, the ambition of how they're changing the kingdom, which matches a lot of what's happening around the world. We see that coming from COP26. We see the expectations around how we treat the environment, how we drive the social governance aspects, and how we really make sure that we are delivering sustainable products that fit with what our customers expect today, and connecting that back with the narrative and the expectations that our stakeholders have. And to me, this is very much part of what Alcoa is doing. I see that same DNA inside of our partner Ma'aden, and that helps to sustain what we're trying to do in our joint venture, and is a great platform and springboard towards ensuring that we stay relevant, ensuring that we continue to meet those exacting standards and expectations across sustainability.
Thank you, Roy. Excellency. I think you, like me, are sitting here thinking about these amazing companies, including partnerships with Australia, Canada, the US. What's the call to action? I've known you as a man of action, not a man of words. What's the call of action here for Saudi?
Well, I think for Saudi Arabia, our call of action is well articulated in Vision 2030. And as I mentioned in the previous session, it is underpinned to a large degree by partnering with companies both from Saudi Arabia and abroad, thinking big, being bold, as mentioned in the morning, not just dealing with the challenges of the future, but reimagining and creating the future that the rest of the stakeholders want us to have. A sustainable, affordable, safe, integrated world where, as Mark mentioned, our children and grandchildren can enjoy the prosperity that we've enjoyed over our lifetime. And Saudi Arabia is your partner to do that. We already have that boldness and that audacious thinking embedded in our vision, but it's also cascaded from the vision into our strategies, policies, regulations, and resource allocations. For those of you, and all of you are essentially either in the mining sector or supporting the mining sector through financing, consultancy, and other means, you need to be reassured that it is not peripheral to the thinking of Saudi Arabia, but runs right at the center. We realize that 7.5 billion people going to 9 with increased purchasing power and prosperity, urbanization, these billions of people are going to need a lot of materials that are produced sustainably, and all of our policies are to do that. Some of those materials will come from our petrochemical value chains. A lot of them will come from minerals and mining. And the kingdom is, in addition to the vision, in addition to the partnership approach, in addition to the security that we provide through our governance and through our history of being investor-friendly, we also have the right geography in our location to allow you to access key parts of the planet. We have the geology, as the geologists have been saying all day, with the prospectivity and the prolific resources across a number of key minerals and mining, and many of them, as we know, have not yet been discovered. And we have also the energy. Something I have not talked about a lot is, at the end of the day, we are in an energy-intensive industry. You heard from His Royal Highness, the Minister of Energy today. The kingdom is not only endowed with hundreds of trillions of cubic feet of natural gas that's going to be with us for the rest of the century, I am sure, but we have unlimited supply of solar and wind that the kingdom is leading the next frontier of turning that into other forms of sustainable energy, like hydrogen, like ammonia, and continuing to research and develop other forms that we still don't know. But you put all of that together, the kingdom will be your most reliable supplier of sustainable energy for the long term, not for 10, 20, or 30 years. In addition to that, not only do we have world-class infrastructure, but we continue to invest hundreds of billions of dollars of upgrading both our physical, digital, regulatory, and security infrastructures to allow investors. And of course, the most important underpinning of all of this is human talent. The kingdom has a young population. We have a population, and I can tell you from my personal experience, and I think Andrew and I have partnered over the last couple of decades on world record-breaking investments that have been enabled by the capability of young men and women from Saudi Arabia who are taking on challenges of upskilling themselves and then taking on the most difficult fields. In our previous joint venture, it's petrochemicals. And my experience with Ma'aden, and by the way, I can tell you stories about Abdullah Basfar walking into my office almost 20 years ago and saying that this company that was just created, Ma'aden, had the vision of developing the mineral resources, and we worked from Aramco at that to partner with them and provide them with the energy, with the land in Ras Al Khair, with pipelines, and the rest. Our panelists on the screen have seen the results with the developments of the bauxite and phosphate, and to the valuable export commodities they have become. Those success stories, from oil in the 30s of the last century to SABIC 50 years ago, and eliminating flaring and turning it into value, to making an audacious idea of developing faraway resources of bauxite and phosphate and making it a reality today, multiplying that multiple times with EV, with metals and others, value chains and critical materials in a sustainable way, is all within our grasp. And we're going to do it by working together. The call to action, Andrew, in short, is take on that challenge, trust in yourself and trust in us, and we can meet what the stakeholders want us to do.
Yeah, I think there's two narratives out of what you just said, Excellency, that we've been hearing about, and I'd love some of the other panelists to comment on them. Narrative number one is actually the emergence of a cost-effective mining sector in the kingdom. And maybe, Mark, you can comment on that, because that's cost efficiency, that's prospectivity, there's a lot of factors into that. But the other, which doesn't really come with a resource-rich country all that often, my home country of Australia struggles with it, which is value-adding it, and going and building in-country demand for those valuable resources, whether they be, aluminium, whether they be fertilizers, whether they be in the EV sector. So, Mark, maybe you comment on the first narrative. Sustainable mining, by the way, I heard the Minister, His Excellency, mention that every time he said mining. Okay, so maybe you can comment on that, and I'll get others to comment on the other part of the narrative.
So when you look at what you say about a mining center and sustainability, this is the gap. It's a very important point, and that is, it's all about people. Mining doesn't work without people, and to apply the right people, you need the right skills. Need the right skills, and that's something mining has generally neglected. And we sort of accepted that we can go to the back of the queue, the university queue, and accept people who are not at the cutting edge and intellectually smart and super ambitious. And I think that's really, we talked about really advocating mining this morning. And that's what we've got to do, is we've got to go out there, and that's certainly what we're doing in Barrick, is you go out there and you attract the smartest people, because if we're going to transition, we need those smart people. If we're going to mine responsibly, as the Minister says, we still need smart people. In fact, we need smarter people. And so that's really and when you talk about a center, I think more importantly, we need a community. And I think that's what investors bring, and that's what I believe this conference is going to attract, is young people want to be part of a positive, supportive chain. And as miners, the first investment we make has to be education, skilling, and young people.
Abdullah, maybe comment on the value add piece, and maybe the part about attracting people. Value add to critical minerals, the Minister mentioned that several times. Lithium, you're bringing it in from Australia, I understand, but you want to value add here.
Our focus have been always in resources, whether it's human capital or mineral resources. From day one, when we talked to our colleagues in Australia, we said, we're going to hire Saudis from day one who will go and get started to pick up the technologies and know-how in exploring and mining in Australia and bring it back here and participate in the feed studies for the advanced plant that we are, like lithium hydroxide. And not forgetting, of course, that to have a sustainable industry, you must look after the people, you must look after the community, and you must protect the environment. And that goes without say. Our plant in Yanbu, for example, we decided to build it would require probably from 600 to 800 mega. It's going to be coming from a renewable, solar. And we'll be talking to probably third party to do that. We took on our shoulder because of our access to the expertise and the know-how and the technologies available for years in Australia in mining these minerals, in particular the future minerals, which is the lithium and nickels and associate. We took on our shoulder to partner with serious Saudi companies or even non-Saudi companies in Saudi Arabia to develop these industries, to develop the mineral wealth of Saudi, and to enable them to access the expertise and the technology and the support that we can provide to them. And we're gonna see one announcement signed tomorrow as a first step to deliver what we have promised. So we're moving. And one thing about attracting Saudis, the minute we have made an announcement a few months back, we've been receiving emails and calls from young men and women that they want to be part of this. And we welcome that, and we're screening the applicants. They see it, this is the future. This is the future industry. Because what we are saying is we're building a complex that would be delivering the energy chemical to the world, as we are doing in oil. And we will be up to the expected, let's say, demand of the world outside of China. This is why we're moving very quick in acquiring additional mines in Australia, while we will hopefully develop the full value chain within Kingdom, as we did with the bauxite and phosphate earlier. You can see from mine to mouth, or from mine to farmers in the phosphate and the aluminum. Everything is fully integrated within Saudi Arabia. Now, hopefully we'll reach that stage, but initially to secure our investment and the supply of our local downstream and international, we are well positioned to deliver to European and North American their needs of these chemicals. And we are building our plant next door to you. So we need to talk seriously.
Yes, exactly.
All right?
Yeah, the Lucid factory will be right alongside yours. So the other way around, I guess, as your customer. Roy, developing a value-add minerals value chain in the kingdom. You know, you've got experience in this, and the minister mentioned energy intensity in industries that are energy intensive. Yours is. What would you like to see going forward to continue this investment in the value chain?
Yeah, I think it's a very critical question, right? Because I think you look at aluminum as an example, and so we start with a resource with bauxite, transform it in the refinery into alumina, and finally in the smelting step, which, as you said, is very electricity intensive, you turn it into aluminum. And so you've already starting to add value across each of those different steps. However, when you think about how you compete as a global commodity, obviously you can sell commodity-grade aluminum around the world, and that's something that Alcoa does in a number of just different jurisdictions. It's sort of the easy answer to find a way to use that competitively priced energy in the great bauxite resource and turn that into something. But the next logical question is then how you take a city, an industrial city like Ras Al Khair, which already has significant investment in place, but then also try and think, what do you do in order to create demand inside Ras Al Khair, inside of the kingdom? And Andrew, like you know, from an automotive perspective, from all these different potential uses of aluminum in my case, the more you can create that infrastructure downstream, the more attractive that you can make the kingdom to be making these downstream investments, the more attractive it makes it to do the work upstream as well. And so from our perspective, you know, we have the global market, but at the same time, if we're able to find those downstream partners and to create more value, it simply creates an atmosphere where you can get more talent, where you can get more individuals that step in and say, "Hi, I want to be part of this supply chain. I want to be part of this sustainability story," and get those recycling loops as well, which I talked about in my my discussion with Ryan earlier, the more you get this virtuous circle pumping, and the more value you can create and you can add into these products. And so to me, you've got the scale, you've got this attractive environment that the kingdom can provide around infrastructure and around energy competitiveness, and you can then turn that into a virtuous circle of creating more value for the future.
We're getting close to the end, but I want to make sure I ask Michael one more question on ESG investing. Is it here, and are you seeing the metrics? And are you getting the demand?
Yeah, I mean, it's absolutely here. It's increasing every single day. From the junior perspective, Orion has always been at the vanguard of that. We adopted the IFC performance standards as our standard that we would adhere to a long, long time ago before people started focusing on this. But increasingly, our investors are asking us to ensure that we are adhering to those standards, which wasn't the case sort of a couple of iterations of funds ago. So it's absolutely here. As I said earlier, I think Saudi Arabia, in many respects, is well positioned because of the fact that it isn't inherently, and this is a mass generalization I appreciate, but it's not sitting there in a huge, densely populated place from a social perspective. Most of these mining assets in particular either are located in more sparsely populated areas, so you don't have as intense social pressures. Likewise, from an environmental perspective, again, mass generalization, but there is not, it's not a rainforest, if you will. So there is scope to be dealing with those things fairly easily here. So I think it's well positioned to be dealing with that. And then just touching upon your question to Mark, actually, from a sustainability and then a cost perspective, again, I think Saudi Arabia is in a wonderful position because globally, head grades are falling, quality of assets are falling, accessibility of those assets is getting more and more challenging, hence costs are going up. But you have the fairly unique situation in Saudi Arabia where there are still world-class undeveloped assets sitting there at the surface, as it were. And what that means is it means actually they're easy to absorb. It is easy, rather, to absorb those inherent costs of good environmental and social practices.
Yep, and we are nearly at the end, and I want to give the Minister the last word, so Excellency, just in 1 second. But Jock, just one last question for you, maybe teeing up the Minister. I heard exports several times in the conversation. In a transition, building a commodity base of any sort to value add, you're going to need export competitiveness. Is that something top of mind for yourself as an investor here?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, Roy mentioned it a little earlier, but what makes Saudi competitive is not only mineral resources, but as we've said, you've got the raw materials, you've got good energy costs, you've got access to sulfur and natural gas, which are critical to phosphate production. The chemical side of phosphate production is at least as big as the mining side. So the reality is it is a chemical manufacturing again. But the other thing that gets missed, and I think the Minister mentioned it earlier, was access to other markets. The freight from Saudi to, say, India is about a third or a quarter of what it is from some of the other big producers of phosphate fertilizers. So you've got a great access to other markets and a great competitive advantage. And then as time changes, your company as well, Lucid, we're now talking about lithium iron phosphate batteries. So the next value add could well be the more industrial uses of that phosphate or that phosphoric acid. So, as we look forward, we see this as a very key piece of the competitiveness of the kingdom.
Thank you. Yeah, as a chemical engineer, I love hearing all this chemistry that's being talked about. Excellency, last question for you. I know you put a lot of effort into pushing out the message of the new Saudi Arabia with roadshows pre-COVID, and now I'm assuming the phone's ringing off the hook for you to see people coming to invest. All these people here, what sort of message do you want them to know about Saudi Arabia, and what can your ministry do to facilitate their investment opportunities?
Thank you very much, Andrew, for that, for giving me that opportunity. First of all, I think it's important to know not so much where we are today, and we are in a very good place. I've said that a number of times, but to know where the destination. And our destination is a never-ending place, because we always want to strive to be the best place for investors to be, the most competitive, the most investor-friendly, and we realize for us to grow the participation of the private sector into our large and growing economy to 65%, they have to be extremely, I wouldn't say extremely, but they have to be sufficiently profitable to be able to recycle their profits into further investment. We're targeting over $3 trillion of investment in the next 9 years. And a lot of that investments will come from indigenous sources, Saudi companies, PIF, but the role of international investors, not only in bringing capital, but bringing their know-how, bringing their access to market, bringing their best practices, and having those best practices rub on their Saudi partners, as well as, with all humility, on us as Saudi government, to learn from them what works best where, so that we continue to improve. So it's a never-ending destination that we're looking at. We will continue to improve together with you. We will create a competitive environment that is also sustainable and that allows you to tell your shareholders and stakeholders, wherever they are, that you are reinventing that future for the mining, metals, advanced manufacturing value chains that we're either directly involved in or supporting. And the Kingdom should be and will be your partner of choice.
Thank you. Big round of applause for our panel, and thank you to our remote participants as well. And I'd like to bring Remy Piet back on stage, your moderator, for your next session. Thank you very much.